we want to talk about the fact that in 6 days, all Ghanaians, of course, of sound mind, 18 years and above, will be in a queue and will be trying to elect a leader. And from experience, and depending on which party wins the election, there is a possibility. We have seen that happen for rancor between landlords and their tenants. And that usually happens if they both belong to different political parties. And especially if the tenant supports the winning team and the landlord's party loses. So in some cases, we've seen tenants being thrown out, sometimes for jubilating after the declaration of results. So if you have not paid your rent at that time, that's a different story altogether. It could be worse. But what does the law say about this? The Public Relations Officer for the Rent Control Department of Ghana, Emmanuel Hovey Posu, is joining me in the studio. Mr. Posu, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gifty.
But before we start the conversation, I want to hear from you. If you have a similar story, or you know someone who has been there, I want to hear from you. Send us a message on 0540-109009. Now, 0540-109009. If you're a regular texter, you already have this number. So send us a message. Mr. Posu, let me start by asking, yes, is there any legal regime around this, you know, how landlords and tenants can behave towards each other when it comes to election? I don't think so. Okay.
So, Gifty, if we will start with, you know, Chapter 5 of the Constitution gives us as Ghanaians the right, that's the fundamental human right and freedom. So, for your permission, it says, when you look at Article 12.2, it states, every person in Ghana, whatever his race, place of origin, political opinion, that's where the emphasis is.
Okay.
Political opinion, color, religion, creed, or gender shall be entitled to the fundamental human rights and freedoms of the individual.
Sorry for that interruption. Please do not call our number.
Contained in this chapter, but subject to respect for the right and freedom of the other and then the public interest. So we all have our fundamental human rights based on our political ideologies. But in exercising our political freedom, we have to think about the other person's also freedom and also the public interest. But when you come specifically to the Rent Act, there are offenses that has been laid. When you look at Section 25, it has stipulated all the offenses that when you committed and you go before the magistrate, you'll be sanctioned according to what the law has specified. Okay. So specifically, if you look at Section 25, 1B, it states, every person who in respect of any premises demand or receive any condition, whether in money or in kind, or in any other manner whatsoever, or whether by way of rent, fine, premium, or otherwise, for the grant, renewal, continuance, or assessment of any tenancy, commits an offense. So let's put this in perspective.
Okay.
So as a political party or as an individual, you may go and rent somebody's house. The landlord may be in a different party. You also be in a different party. Yeah. You have the right to exercise your political opinion and then just be free. But just as I said, when you are jubilating or you are even going out for campaign, you have to make sure that you don't cause annoyance to your fellow landlord or adjacent tenant.
What constitutes annoyance?
Yes, but over-jubilating.
And what is over-jubilating?
Over-jubilating is when you have to go out, you have the right to wear your political dress, but you don't have to use it to, how to describe it? Use it to mock somebody. Let's assume your party has also won and you are going out to jubilate. You don't have to do this to mock your landlord or mock your fellow tenant. Because if you cause this, you will be causing annoyance to them. But that annoyance cannot be determined by the landlord in your house. If such thing happens, what the landlord has to do is to report to the rent control, who will do an investigation and then make a determination. So it's not up to the landlord to sit somewhere and then think that a tenant is causing nuisance. So I'm forcefully, by myself, ejecting the tenant. In all cases, if a tenant commits an offense in your opinion as a landlord, You don't have the right to forcefully eject the tenant by removing the tenant's property and belongings outside. What you need to do is to report to the rent control department, where we'll do the investigation and then make the determination. Also, if you look at Section 17, it has laid down the process under which a landlord can evict a tenant.
Okay.
So all those things are there. So what we are saying is, during this political era, landlords should be careful how they treat their tenants.
Okay.
Tenants should also be careful how they behave before their landlord, so that we will live within harmony within this period. Because election will come, election will go, but we will all stay as family. We will all stay in people's houses and premises. We will all rent houses to people. So let's be careful how we behave during this period.
During elections, usually, do you record, to what extent do you record some of these cases where landlords feel like my party lost, your party won, and I feel you over-jubilated, so I'm sacking you? Is this something that usually happens?
Yeah, it happens. When I was coming, a news just came to me that a tenant with a baby has been thrown out by a landlord just because the landlord was forcing the tenant to join his party.
Why?
And the lady refuses. The unfortunate thing I read, which I don't know the source yet, was that the tenant was owing. So in this circumstance, we can dwell on the rent that the tenant was owing, because the act states that the tenant has no right to owe any landlord for even a month.
Okay.
So therefore, you can stand on this and apply for what we call recovery of possession. It's even not your power as a landlord to pack the belongings of the tenants out of there, which constitutes an offense.
So yeah. I'm a landlord. You owe me for more than a month. You have not spoken to me. Even if I want to sack you, I can't do that until I make a report to the rent control. So in this case, where the woman owes, and what if she is just saying that the landlord tried to push her into his party, but she actually is lying? How do you investigate that? Because we know that the rent control also has its own issues in terms of resources.
No, in terms of resources, but that does not take the fact that we are doing what we are expected to do, even with our limited resources. What the case study we are analyzing now is, even if that's why we invite both the landlord and the tenant. We listen to both of them before we make any determination. Okay. So in such cases, we cannot just sit somewhere and then adjudicate a case or take a decision. We still have to invite the two parties, listen to them, and then before we come to conclusion on who is at fault or who is not at fault.
So in the case that her things have been thrown out, what do? Do you get the room back for her?
Yes, if the woman needs to come to the rent control and then make the complaint, because this falls under what we call an inducement, or false adjustment. And what we are saying, the law does not permit any landlord to forcefully eject any tenant from his or her premises. The first thing is to report to the rent control if an offense has been committed in your opinion. We will do the investigation, make the recommendation, and then order the tenant to move from your premises.
I see.
Yeah.
I'm asking people to send me messages, and the messages are coming in really fast, so it's making it a bit difficult to focus. But let me see which one I can get quickly. Okay, this one said, my landlord was talking to me harshly because he suspected I want to vote against his party. Hence, he had an unfriendly attitude towards me. Okay, he has just deleted the message, but he says, because I felt I went home to vote against. Okay, I'm not quite sure, but you're texting from Bolga, and he says that his landlord had what he's calling a hostile attitude towards him. Okay. This one is a hostile attitude. Okay. How do you determine that?
Yeah, but this falls under Section 27, which is an offense to induce tenants to quit. So every person who shall do any act whatsoever or refrain from doing anything which the condition of the tenancy requires him to do, with intent to compel the lessee of any premises to give up possession thereof, shall be guilty of an offense, and shall, on conviction by the appropriate magistrate, be liable to a fine not exceeding 50 penalty units. So if we draw a tenancy, and the tenancy you don't state in there that we are going this direction, and then we've signed the tenancy already, and then you come that now we are moving into this direction, it constitutes an offense. And in this case, you are just inducing the tenant to quit. And this constitutes an offense. And if you are late before the magistrate, the penalty unit is there for the magistrate to impose on you.
Okay, we need to wrap up because we've run out of time. But of course, the shorter, the better. Then it sticks with you more. I'll just take some of the messages. This one says, do landlords have the capacity to determine what is nuisance and forcibly eject a tenant?
No, that's what I've just said.
It has to be stated in the...
It has to be, but anything that is stated in the tenancy agreement must be in consonant with the act, or even with the Constitution of Ghana. So anything that is stated there, if it's not in consonant, when it comes before us, we push it aside, we take the act, and then we act on it.
This one says...
But let me just answer. I've just stated that even if an offense is committed, you, the landlord, has no right to determine the grievance of the offense. You have to report to the rent control. We will make an investigation and you don't have the right to forcefully eject any tenant from your premises.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll read a few of your messages and then we take it away from there. This one says, good evening. My landlord belongs to one of the political parties and I am not. We are about 7 tenants in the house, but I'm the only one who doesn't show up. I'm always cool. I don't deal with party colors because I know the kind of landlord I'm living with. This is Seth in Dansoman. He says, I know we can't stop people from jubilating when their party wins. But I'll advise all tenants to be very careful because some of the landlords are something, whether you are owing or not. If they know you don't belong to their party, they will throw you out. But if that happens, you can report to the rent control.
Exactly.
If that happens, you can report to the rent control. This one says, Gifty, the same thing happened to me before, where my rent was increased 2 times. So this time around, I have paid the rent in advance to avoid this one. This one says, today's election could have been better. Okay, you're talking about missing names on the register. You're talking about the elections generally. Thank you. We're just talking about rent and the elections right now. And I'm wrapping up. I'll just take his final thoughts. But because we've asked you to send your messages, I want to read some of them. This one says, it is easier said than done. And I'm sure this one goes to you. So they always talk nicely when given the chance, but implementation is the problem. Some landlords are still demanding 2 years in advance, which is against the law. Please ask him how far they are going with such issues. But let's wrap this up with your final comments as you answer this question. Just put in an advice for people going into the election, what you can do, what you can't do for us. Yeah.
Okay, so quick one before that. There's a message for increment of rent.
Yes.
Let me state here that no landlord has the right to be increasing rent as and when he or she wants.
After 2 years.
After 2 years, but even that, you have to come for an assessment where we'll come and assess the place and give you the rent or the rate at which you have to charge your premises. And secondly, with the 2 years advance, we've made several progress. The progress we've made, we've been able to sanction some landlords who have charged more than 6 months rent. We are calling our tenants who, the law demands that the landlord has no right to demand or receive more than 6 months rent if it's a long tenancy. So if a landlord has demanded or has even collected more than 6 months from you, report to the rent control department because we cannot be everywhere. So report to them, we'll invite the landlord and then the necessary action will be taken. On the advice.
So advice, yes.
Yes. On the advice, that's what you are saying is, we all have our fundamental human rights and freedom. But in exercising it, you have to consider the right of the other person. And then you have to consider also the public interest. So if you are jubilating, make sure it doesn't cause annoyance to your fellow tenant or to the landlord. And landlords too, you can't impose certain restrictions on your tenant based on the fact that he or she has come to pay money and is dwelling in your premises. This falls under what we call an inducement. You are inducing the tenant that if you cannot join my party, then leave my house. It's an offense. If we lay you before the magistrate, you will be sanctioned or you'll be penalized. Yes.
So that's the public relations officer for the rent control department, Emmanuel Hove Bosu. They're sharing with you some advice. And Ajimai, I'll end with Ajimai's message. He said he's speaking from Seshri Sam. He says, I was at the University of Development Studies. I couldn't talk during election 2016 because I didn't know my landlord's party. Let's be wise. Jubilation after a party wins for the party knows you not. Okay. Says the party knows you not, so don't get evicted because of the party. But if anything like that happens, you got an advice. You can go to the rent control and lodge a complaint. Mr. Kosu, thank you very much for coming. As we go along, we'll see if we have to repeat some of these. This is still the pulse with me, Gifty and up.